Hey everyone, today, I've got some spine-chilling stories to share with you. Stories about haunted houses, mysterious Ouija board encounters, and the eerie events that will make you question the unseen world around us. So, grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's dive right in without wasting any time. The House That Watched Me. This story comes from when I was a teenager, around 13 to 17 years old. It's something that still gives me chills every time I think about it. It all started when my family moved into this house. It wasn't old enough to seem haunted, but strange things started happening almost immediately. One of the first nights, I had my best friend over, and we were just hanging out when all the built-in drawers in my room suddenly slid open on their own. We both froze, staring at them. There was no one near them. And then, without saying a word, we bolted down the hall to my mom's room. When we told her, she just brushed it off, saying it was probably nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. That same night, we noticed something even creepier, a clear indent on my chair, like someone invisible was sitting there. We stared at it, and just like that, it vanished. Now, at this point, I didn't know what to think. But a few days later, I was on a video call in my room, sitting across from my closet. For some context, my closet doors were heavy, old, and very hard to open. As I was talking, out of nowhere, both doors suddenly slammed wide open at the same time. Being the curious, and maybe not so smart, teenager I thought, hey, why not figure this out? So, I decided to use a certain board game, yes, the one you're probably thinking of. And let's just say, it didn't go well. During the session, the spirit said it was over 600 years old and had a tragic story. It was not happy to be there. At this point, my best friend and I were terrified. We wanted answers, so I emailed my teacher to ask about what the land in that area was like 600 years ago. His answer shook me. It was once the site of battles involving indigenous tribes. That explained a lot, like the unusual name the spirit gave us and the restlessness it seemed to have. But things only got stranger from there. One night, I opened my bedroom door and saw something I'll never forget. A tall, dark figure stood there. When I say dark, I don't mean like a shadow of a person. It was solid, towering from the floor to the ceiling, and it looked like it was made of darkness itself. I panicked, slammed the door shut, and didn't come out of my room for the rest of the night. For a while after that, things were quiet. Until I was about 15. That's when it all started again. One day, I was recording video messages to send to my boyfriend when he messaged me back, "What's that weird whispering in the background?" My room had been completely silent when I recorded it, so I turned the volume up on the clip he sent. Sure enough, there was faint, harsh whispering in the background. It didn't sound like words I could understand, more like something out of a scary movie. Around the same time, something else weird happened. My room was always warm, but there was this one specific spot on my bed that was freezing cold. I knew that was supposed to be a sign of a spirit. So, I got an idea. If my phone could pick up the whispering, maybe it could catch something I couldn't see. But when I tried pointing my camera toward the cold spot, my phone, fully charged, suddenly powered off. Completely dead. It had never done that before. I was so scared, I spent the night sleeping on the couch. Now, this part is hard to explain, but it's one of the creepiest things that happened. My window blinds always had 3 shadows on them, no idea why, because there wasn't anything outside that could cast those shadows. But over time, the shadows started disappearing. First, one vanished. When it did, the room felt darker, heavier. Then, a week later, the second shadow disappeared, and it happened again. Finally, the third shadow was gone, and I still have no idea what they were or why they disappeared one by one. After all this, I was pretty much used to the strange things happening in that house. But then, I learned something that made me question everything all over again. Remember my best friend from when we first moved in? Years later, She told me that after she stayed at my house, one of the spirits followed her. She said it tormented her for years. We drifted apart by then, so I didn't find out until much later. I moved out of that house a couple of years ago. Looking back, I can still feel the difference in the energy between that house and my new one. I'm glad I'm no longer there, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever was in that house wasn't just in my imagination. The haunting that followed me. I've always been a believer in the paranormal. It's something that runs deep in my family. My dad, in particular, has always told us about this unique gift that seems to be passed down through generations. It started with my great-grandfather, who practiced spiritualism. He was close to my family long before I was born and even helped my dad through some unexplainable experiences. Growing up, my older sister, who's 8 years older than me, showed signs of something strange. She's 30 now and doesn't remember much of it, but when she was little, about 2 or 3 years old, she would randomly know things she shouldn't have been able to. When my parents asked her how she knew, her answer was always, "My brain told me." One day, though, she said something that caught everyone off guard. My dad asked her the usual question, "Where did you learn that?" But this time, her answer was different. "Rosendo told me." Rosendo was the name of our great-grandfather, someone my sister had never met or even heard of. My parents never talked about him, and at that age, there was no way she could have come across his name on her own. To this day, it's one of those family mysteries that we can't explain. As for me, I've always felt like I carry a strange energy with me. Weird things tend to happen around me, especially when I'm at other people's houses. Friends would say their homes felt normal until I came over, and then, for a few days after I left, they'd experience unusual activity. One of my closest friends, back when I was around 10, lived in a house where we spent most weekends hanging out. Her parents believed in the paranormal, which made things easier to talk about. They'd often leave us alone for the weekend, just dropping off food and heading out. While I was there, little oddities would happen, things moving, strange noises, but there's one night I'll never forget. We were upstairs in this small hallway room watching one of those over-the-top celebrity ghost stories shows. It was a fun, light-hearted night, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, there was this massive metallic bang. It was so loud that we both screamed and jumped off the couch. We instantly knew where it came from, the bathroom, just down the hall. It sounded like someone had slammed their hand, hard, against the washing machine. But here's the thing, no one else was home, and all the dogs, small ones, were downstairs. There was no way any of them could have caused it. Terrified but curious, we cautiously went to check it out. The bathroom looked completely normal, nothing out of place, nothing had fallen, and the washing machine wasn't even running. Still, we could feel something wasn't right. We bolted back to her room, slammed the door, and hid under the blankets like scared kids do. But the fear didn't stop there. While we were under the covers, trying to stay quiet, we heard something pacing in the hallway. Slow, deliberate creaks on the floorboards, moving back and forth from the bathroom to the bedroom door. We stayed frozen, too scared to move. At some point, the noises stopped, but we didn't dare leave the room until her parents came home later that night. Whatever it was, it left a mark on both of us. The usual weird things kept happening at her house after that, but nothing that aggressive ever returned. Looking back, I realized that the energy I carry with me seems to attract these experiences. Even at home, I've had my share of strange moments. There's one in particular that still sends chills down my spine, but I'll save that for another time. The night that changed how I see the world forever. When I was a kid, my family moved around a lot, not because we were in the military or anything, just, life happened. It had its perks, though. We got to meet all kinds of people and experience some pretty unique places. At the time of this story, we just moved into a new house. It was a kid's dream, huge backyard, tall trees, even a pool. But the house had a past. Years before we moved in, there had been a fire. Part of the house had been rebuilt, though I never really knew how bad the damage had been. Rumor had it the previous owners blamed their son for starting the fire. Of course, the son denied it, but the truth? Well, let's just say that part of the story still haunts me. Now, my mom was really into spiritual stuff. She had friends who were priests, shamans, yogis, you name it. They'd often come over, talk about energy, cleanse the house, and have deep conversations about the spiritual world. One of her friends stood out, though. He was kind of famous in that circle. People said he couldn't walk in crowded places because his energy would get overwhelmed. As a kid, I thought it sounded kind of cool, but also a little weird. One day, this guy was staying with us for a week, and he started exploring the house. He wasn't doing anything dramatic, just walking around, chatting, and feeling the energy. He told us he planned to perform a ritual that night to, as he put it, help the house. When night fell, it was pitch black outside, cloudy, no stars, just darkness. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I wandered in, curious. We had these massive windows that looked out into the backyard, and the whole scene felt eerie. He was sketching something, so I walked over to see what it was. The drawing stopped me in my tracks. It was incredible but also terrifying. The figure had horns, 3 eyes, and teeth that looked more like jagged shards. Even as a kid, I couldn't shake the thought, is he drawing this thing, or is he summoning it? I didn't say anything, but I must have looked scared because he turned to me and said something I'll never forget. If you've ever felt like something was watching you, it probably was. Then he pointed to the drawing and casually added, this one is lost. There are many things attached to it. I'm going to help it move on. It's likely connected to the fire. That stopped me cold. We hadn't told him about the fire. Not a word. As I sat there, staring at the drawing and then out into the pitch-black backyard, a wave of memories hit me. Every time I'd walked down a hallway and felt the air shift. Every time I'd gotten a random chill standing by a window. The nights when I'd feel a light touch on my shoulder, or when I'd look outside and feel like something was out there. All of it suddenly made sense. He asked if I wanted to join him and his friends for the ritual. I politely declined. Honestly, I didn't want to know what they were about to do, or see whatever they might encounter. The ritual itself was private, and I didn't witness it. But the next morning, the house felt different. Lighter, maybe. I never experienced anything unusual there again. But even now, I can't get that drawing out of my head or forget the feeling of being watched that night.